Don't upload. Once the liveness is finished, remove.
Three.
Oh, that worked.
Yeah.
Personal reasons.
Look at that.
Got,
Mark.
yeah.
Okay.
Definitely not autistic.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello. I'm going to keep this brief. This is Laura, everyone. This is Laura, everyone. Hello. And she's going to do our talk today. It's on autism, but I'm going to let her explain, okay? Give her a big round of applause, everyone.
Now should be working? Yeah. Okay, I can hear it, yeah. Hello everyone. Hi. I'm Laura. I think I know most of you. Yes, today's talk is about autism. I know you got a message autism and ADHD, but those are two very different things. So for the sake of you not falling asleep, it's going to be autism today, and we can do ADHD another day. But just a little bit about me. I'm a speech and language therapist. I've been working for 10 years and been doing diagnostics in that time pretty much. So that's my professional background. If I've interacted with you, then yes, I have assessed you in my head. But yeah, so today's just a little run through on what is autism and maybe like as a church what we can do to help people in our community who may be on the spectrum. Oh yeah, okay. So, what is autism? Does anyone want to like say what autism is, the definition of it? Clara's not allowed to answer. People who are wired differently. Yeah, that's a good definition. Liz?
Like an inability, Peter said it was a bad answer, but like an inability to understand people's facial expressions and their emotions, like something to do with that.
Yeah, some autistic people may struggle to, interpret non-verbal communication. Anyone else? What comes to your mind when you autism? Okay. Yeah, clarify all of this, but yeah. What else comes to people's mind? Sorry? Broad kinds of autism, yes, it's a spectrum. Yeah? Okay, so autism is a neurodevelopmental condition. So we'll break that down. What it means is is a difference in how the brain develops and processes information. So as Abuna said, it's a difference in how the brain is ultimately wired. And it's influenced by genetics. There's a very strong genetic component. So if someone in the family has it, it's very likely that children or and other relatives will have it as well. Environmental factors I'll talk about later. And it's developmental, which means it's present from childhood. You cannot acquire autism. So, for example, you couldn't have a car accident and have a brain injury and then become autistic. It's present from childhood. Any questions? We'll talk about gender. And by definition, autism is a social communication disorder. So it affects communication and interaction primarily. So a lot of people ask me, why you're a speech therapist, what's that got to do with autism? Well, we specialize in communication disorders, and autism is the most common communication disorder. So yeah, that's the primary thing it affects, is social skills, basically. It's a lifelong condition, but things that people can do, strategies they can implement to enhance their quality of life, how they act in their environment, participate as as well, condition. And it's a spectrum, like Leandra said. No two people with autism are the same. They're still unique people with their unique profiles, characteristics, strengths, challenges. So, like I said, my job is diagnostic. So every patient I see whether or not they're autistic, and it's based on 5 different criteria. So number 1 is a deficit in social communication and interaction. We'll break that down because there's several areas of this. Social reciprocity. Anyone guess what that means? Yeah? Yeah, so like back and forth conversation. Else? Yeah, relating to people, yeah. So this is things like initiating, sustaining a conversation, asking back and forth questions, sharing interest in other people, offering comfort, offering empathy. It's also about the quality of interaction. So when you're interacting with someone, are they constantly talking about themselves or about this thing that they're obsessed with, or are they pick up on their social cues and have a back and forth interaction? So yeah, if it's reciprocal, basically. So autistic people struggle with that element of reciprocity. It's also characterized by deficits in non-verbal communication. So as Lydia was saying, they may struggle to understand non-verbal communication is used to get messages. So for example, now I'm using my hands to talk to you, I'm gesturing. I know that I've got a role as a speaker to get a message across to you, so I'm using everything I can, facial expressions, my eye contact, my gestures. Autistic people may be a bit more mute aspect, and maybe just rely on spoken language to communicate, rather than using non-verbal communication. If you think of things like eye contact, for example, that's probably something you might notice in autistic people, that they struggle with eye contact. So again, it's difficulties understanding that's a way to communicate. For example, if I look at Mark and I hold my gaze, he'll get the hint that I'm trying to communicate something with him. Whereas an autistic person, it might have to like catch their eye across the room. And that's one of the things we ask parents when we is catch their eye across the room, and they understand that you're trying to get their attention. Any questions?
You say catch the eye means to have a non-verbal communication through the eyes, or to have just an eye contact?
Both. So eye contact, like in conversation, sustaining that, using that to like end an interaction. For example, if I'm looking at you now and then I look away, you know that I'm ending my interaction. It's understanding that. It's understanding those social nuances. But yes, also understanding how we use it to communicate things. And then developing, maintaining, and social relationships. So with autism, there's going to be an impact, and the impact really is on someone's social life, friendships, relationships, colleagues, how they interact and communicate with other people. Often when adults come, they'll tell me that their boss suggested they should get autistic because they're really struggling in the workplace, or even a spouse, for example, they've been having difficulties, with their relationship. It does cause or have an impact on their ability to maintain relationships. Any questions?
With neurodivergencies,
Say that again, sorry.
is there something, or is there a discriminatory that protect neurodivergent people?
There'll be things like the Disability Act that would offer protection, yeah.
Because I was trying to find a replacement tenant for my flat, and autistic, and they wouldn't let her live with them because she couldn't communicate. So that was discriminatory, so I have a case now with a lawyer.
Does she have a diagnosis?
Yes.
Then you can build up a case. Good luck with that. Okay, so as I said, by definition, social communication disorder, but this is a very important part of the diagnostic criteria as well. It's called stereotyped, restricted, and repetitive behaviors. These are things that really stick more in autistic people. So one of the things might be the way that they use their language or their speech. So they may have repetitive movements. In children, you might see things like hand flapping, like that when they're excited, things like tip-talking. We call it stick behaviors, and it's autistic try and regulate themselves. So we will all now do stimming behaviors. So for example, I might play with my hair. You guys might, I don't know, what kind of stimming behaviors do you do? Mark picks his nose. What was that, sorry? Yeah, shake your legs, things like that. We all do these things to help regulate ourselves. The difference is there's a social etiquette that you might have where you're not appropriate to pick your nose in public. Whereas autistic people may struggle with those social elements of what's appropriate and what's not. So essentially really an inhibition. If they feel like picking nose, then they might just do that because it's what they feel like doing, not thinking about how we will perceive that, for example. So it's almost having no filter, if that makes sense. A need for routines and sameness. So you may see this, for example, if you've ever noticed an autistic having what we call a meltdown, and that might be as simple as something has moved from where they've put it, or it might be the same spoon that they use is not available, for example. I know these sound extreme, but we see it really often in children and adults as well. Anyone want to take a guess why? Maybe strong reactions to that? Black and white thinking. So you have to remember that autistic people already struggle to make sense of the world. It's a very fast-paced, ultimately social environment. They're having to interpret what's going on around them, and the biggest aspect of it really is social with other people. So when things change, you're essentially taking away they can predict their environment. So, and we'll talk about this later in terms of church and how that might manifest church. But yeah, dealing with change in everyday environments is characteristic of autism. Any questions so far? I think I'm moving a bit fast. Anyone want to add anything? Nope. There's rigid patterns. So, like I was saying, we live in a very social world, and it's hard for people to, well, autistic people, to make sense of what could be going on around them. So, to develop rigid, almost black-and-white thinking patterns, and that grey area might be quite hard for them to make sense of. So, what you might see is a really strong sense of justice, for example, in autistic people. Right is right, wrong is wrong, that no kind of grey area might be difficult for them to comprehend. Intense or unusual interests, we call it preoccupations. So autistic people may have what you might think are obsessions. So, for example, I saw a child once who was obsessed with toilets and had to drag his mum in like a public toilet or anyone's toilet. He was just fascinated by toilets. They might collect things, might seem odd, but the intensity might be in daily life, but it's something that, yeah, they're really interested and motivated by. To them there is. To them there's a why. It might be it offers them some kind of predictability, and yeah, it helps regulate them. Yeah. To us it seems like there's no why, but to them there is.
Will they be able to will they be able to explain to us why?
It depends on the level of cognition, so on the intellect, and then the language level. So adults who are verbal would probably be able to see why, but young children or who are more intellectually challenged might struggle.
For them, that's like an acceptable why.
Yes.
The adults, at least.
Yes. Yeah. To them.
Yeah.
To them. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions? And this is a common one you might see as well, is strong reaction to sensory stimuli. So you'll often find that autistic people may struggle in loud, noisy environments. You might see these days in supermarkets, quiet hour, there's like no noise. Some gyms as well have like quiet hours for nurse people where there's no music. And you may see it manifest as like meltdowns or needing to leave the environment. Again, that's just because of how their brains are wired. They may be hyposensitive to input, where they need a lot of that kind of sensory feedback to experience something, or they might be hypersensitive, where even just a small amount, such as noise, for example, could really set them off. And if you think about what a sensory experience our liturgies are, the incense, the noise, the smells, that can make it harder for autistic people to access, yeah. I don't think it's on.
All right. Is that an actual genetic thing, or is that just them, like, because of their poor education or social thing? Like,
No,
if you did like an analysis on their body, would you be able to see like they can't, like their nervous system can't have their own thing or something?
So there's a test that would show you that. They do process it differently. Like their central nervous systems do process it differently. Yeah. Even find like natural variation like here within us, that some might be more sensitive to certain things than others. So yeah, they're not trying, it's genuinely like how. Okay, so I've kind of the diagnostic criteria observationally. These next three things have to also be someone to be diagnosed. So it has to be from childhood. Very often I'm seeing patients that there won't be a strong history from childhood and they won't get diagnosed because it can't just be on an adult presentation. They might accept to the rule, but if symptoms start at adulthood, then we'll be looking at like trauma, if they've gone through traumatic life events, and we'll look at mental health, depression, anxiety disorders. Yeah, it has to be present from childhood. It has an impact on someone's level of functioning. So I had a patient recently where there was criteria, but there was literally no impact on the former relationship, their work. There was just no impact, and have an impact for it to be clinically, which sounds self-explanatory. And the last one is the symptoms of what the person are experiencing can be explained by something else or a mental health need. So that we basically get that right, because we don't want to misdiagnose something when actually their needs could be explained by something else. So you're all ready to diagnose autism now? Based on that criteria? It does, yeah. Yeah. So, as we often people, when they get diagnosed, ask, or they might ask for the functioning, where are they on the spectrum? It's not really how it works. It's not like a line. It's not a linear thing. It's more like just simple. An autistic really struggle with eye contact, so they might be like 2 out of 10 for eye contact. They actually might otherwise have really good social skills, so contact they struggle with. So with social skills, they might be like a 9 out of 10. Basically, it's a wheel, and who's autistic have a unique profile. So, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Dynamic doesn't look the same in everyone. So many skills and difficulties that are involved. Okay, do a game of true or false now. You guys ready? Number 1, on the spectrum somewhere. Hands up if you think true. Hands up if you think false. It's false. This is something that really annoys me. We are not on the spectrum. If we go back and look at the diagnostic criteria, we do not all meet all 5 of these criteria to be on the spectrum. To be anywhere on the spectrum, you have to meet the diagnosis. Anyone want to share why they think we're all on the spectrum? Microphone.
This hard. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Behaviors that you mentioned, like, for instance, you see that from it could be adults who less confidence through, or sometimes it can come from experience. So how when you're just like how differentiate? Because I see like difference related ADHD or autism. Then people say, oh, so am I autistic or do I have ADHD? But then it's 3 out of 5 or whatever for list that they find. So I just want to understand how do you differentiate?
How do we differentiate?
Yeah.
So we have to do differential diagnosis. So that's where the developmental history is really important. So we have to learn from the day they were born up until now, or an adult's life. So, for example, if there was significant trauma, we have to consider things like attachment disorders. If there are significant difficulties with attention, we do have to consider ADHD. It's hard to really answer that without going into like all the of it, but we just basically have to look at all the information, and we look at information often from school or from a workplace, from parents if they're married, from an observational assessment for the person themselves. Don't meet the full criteria, then think, what else could we? Not a tick box, we have to understand the person in front of us as well. So there have been times when patients have actually, but we still won't give diagnosis because we might actually, I still think that their presentation could be because of that trauma they experienced as a child, especially with things like adopted children or children through that. So I don't know if that answers that, but it's a complex picture and we just have to use our clinical judgment to decide what it is.
Thanks.
It's okay. Okay, so we established we're all on the spectrum. If there's anything I want you to from today, it's that, because it really bugs me when people think we all are. We have to be careful with how we use our language, because this is a real condition that affects and impacts people, and it takes people's life by assuming that we all struggle with it. Being social the same as autistic, being the same autistic. Anyone want to challenge that? Clara's saying no. Okay, all men are autistic, true or false? Hands up if you think true. Hands up if you think false. And could you saw my PowerPoint? So my personal opinion is yes, but my professional opinion is no, obviously. But interestingly, there was a famous psychologist, Simon Baron-Cohen, and he used to call autism extreme male brain. Basically, it's a theory based on how men tend to systemize and women tend to empathize, spaghettifies. So systemize and empathize. So typically male brains focus on things like rules, patterns, how things work, logic. Women focus more on emotions. We're more social beings, we understand each other's feelings. So what he noticed is that people, and this is somewhat true, typically tend to systemize rather than empathize. So it used to be called the extreme male, well, he coined it the extreme male brain. That was also because of the ratio of men, male to female, who got diagnosed, typically was about 4 to 1. So for every male who was diagnosed, there'd be 4 and then to 1 female diagnosed. But also, the assessment tools we used were mostly standardized on men. So a lot of the diagnostic criteria we use is actually based on a typical male presentation. Women are naturally hard to pick up. In neurodiversity, whether it's autism or ADHD, we learn to mask. We're naturally more social. We're socialized by our society to be more social, have more social etiquette and be more please people. So that also kind of feeds that stereotype of men being autistic. But yeah, questions about that? Okay. People with autism lack empathy, true or false? Hands up if you think true. Hands up if you think false. Okay. False. So, like I said before, autistic people tend to have a black and white way of thinking. It's that systemizing, like I was just explaining. And therefore, they actually have a very strong sense of justice. What's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. There's a misconception about empathy, and that's mostly because of the way that they might struggle to pick up on social cues that tell them about someone's emotions. For example, if I struggle to read facial expressions as an autistic person, I might really struggle to understand that Mark is upset or angry, and as a result of that, I might not respond appropriately. But that's more to do with how I'm recognizing his emotions. Once I know Mark is sad or angry, autistic people can show empathy just like everyone else. It might not be the same way that other people do it, because then they have to apply a social skills, social rules to do that effectively, if that makes sense. It's also different from, so of like personality disorder, for example, where you do lack empathy. That's different. In that sense, a person would recognize how you're feeling. They would understand or mark angry or upset and still not be able to empathize. As with autism, the difficulty is understanding how someone feels, and because of that, empathizing. We're not doing that. Can someone define empathy? Microphone.
Use the mic, please.
I think it's important because if empathy, if someone is autistic and they are unable to pick up the social cue, which basically tells them how someone else is feeling, but then I tell them I'm feeling happy, I'm sad, whatever, they haven't understood. They've been told to receive the information.
No, yeah, but that's because what they were having to decode you, essentially. They're having to decode. I gave the example of like a facial expression, for example. So they were having to decode that. They can still empathize with with you once how you're feeling.
And if I may add something else, Laura, what is most likely, they become very believing of what you say. So if you say, I'm upset, they might not necessarily understand you're upset, but they will agree you're upset. Like, they will take it. And that put them sometimes into a position they be fooled, or someone can make fun of them, because I can say sarcastically, oh, I'm upset. But they will not get that I'm being sarcastic. They will just say, they will believe what I say. And that way it becomes, okay, oh, Mark is upset. Whenever I was asked, like, he's just joking. But we say I'm upset. So
it's a good point, actually. So sarcasm is completely off the...
So yeah, they will struggle with them because not black and white, it's in that grey area. Yeah.
Thinkers.
Yeah, can be
literate thinkers.
Yeah, that can be part of it, yeah. But yeah, so just to distinguish that, so autistic people with empathy, it's the social decoding that they struggle with. And it's not to be confused by like nasty people who understand and can decode, but still don't care. Does that make sense? Okay. You want to... Joking. Okay. All people with autism have intellectual disabilities. True or false? Hands up if you think true. Hands up if you think false. It's false. Why? By definition, it must be true.
If we've set out criteria by which they fall below the unacceptable standard, or whatever the 6 criteria we've put up,
5.
there is something, and they fall below it, or if you fall out of it, you're not exhibiting them, then by your own definition, not be called autistic, even if one of them, well, if they all fail.
Do you remember what I said to you autism is?
A spectrum.
It's it's a what disorder?
A neurodevelopmental.
Yep, and what was the next thing? By definition, it's a social communication disorder.
Okay.
Which is nothing to do with intellect. It's social communication disorder by definition, yes. You can try. You can try.
Okay, actually, by definition, you're definitely right. I think because it's your thing, I'm being annoying. So I think there was 3 things that lots of seniors like to look at. It's like your AQ, your EQ, and your your intellect, your emotional quotient, your adaptive quotient. I feel like surely your emotive quotient and your adaptive quotient have to be something that part of your intellect as well, or is it?
Yeah,
fair enough.
Autism is a social communication disorder, so all that needs to be affected is the way that you communicate with and interact with the world, and the way that you use sensory information around you. It's nothing actually to do with intellect. People with autism, just like the rest of them, fall on that bell, low IQ, mid IQ, high IQ, because it does not affect intellect. But it doesn't mean you can't have an intellectual disability, autism. Having autism makes you more likely to have other conditions, such as a learning disability. But autism is step 2, a learning disability.
And in some cases, because they become very focused, they actually find them very genius in specific areas.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's a lot of famous people you'll find who are very successful people who are.
So, for example, they find someone who is very on chess, so they become like a chess master, who are genius in playing chess or a specific thing, but communication-wise and socially is just clear out of them.
Exactly.
I agree with you. The reason why I mentioned those 3, 100% agree with everything that was said. The reason why I'm to disagree now is where does intellect lie? How do you define it as an object thing? Do you have to be intellectual with specific things? Was it intellectual, or is it just generally intelligent?
So there are IQ tests, which assess someone's cognition basically, and it's things like how they solve problems. It's a range of tests, and yeah, it's separate from autism. I think what you might be thinking of, a lot of you will probably know autistic people who do have a learning disability, and you can tell really clearly that, you know, that they're struggling, but that's because they have a learning disability as well as the autism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah. So.
No, I'm saying, yeah, I
Oh,
understand.
yeah. So, and this says all people with autism have intellectual disabilities, but that's false. That's not to underestimate that there is a large percentage of autistic people who do. A lot of autistic people struggle with them.
Apologies.
What, the all?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. But yeah, as I was saying, there are autistic people who actually will be above average IQ as well. Any questions about that? Okay, next one. People with autism prefer to be alone. True or false? Hands up if true. Hands up if false. Think it's a trick? No, we're not generalizing people. That's what we don't do. That's called stereotyping. Okay, it depends on the person. Everyone is different. Yeah, everyone's different. The amount of patients I talk to who actually they really friends, really want to be able to socialize, but they know that they struggle with it. So remember, it's not a one size fits all. It depends on the person. Okay. Autism is caused by bad parenting or emotional trauma. Hands up if true. No one wants to commit anymore. Hands up if false. False. So, and I will, you're not fully off, but it's not caused by parenting. It's neurodevelopment. Remember, there's a genetic predisposition to someone becoming autistic. Having that, there is a higher risk of autism if there's things like substance abuse in pregnancy, for example. If there's exposure to like stresses like poor nutrition, limited access to healthcare, like there is a link between like low social economic status and like background and maternal mental health as well. Like I said, substance abuse. There is it's not causal affiliation. When I mentioned environmental factors earlier, I was referring to there are studies showing that there is an increased risk of autism when there's exposure to environmental like pollutants, toxins, things like that. So there was a study about living in a port and how that increased the risk of autism in pregnancy. Again, the exposure to environmental pollutants, but it's not causal, it's just a situation. All right, I think this is the second last one. Autism looks the same in everyone. You all know that's not true, so it's false. Last one, being autistic is the same as antisocial or introverted. Well done, guys. Well done. Prize for Justina at the end. So what I wanted to say about this is autism is a core deficit. It's not a choice. So when people say, oh, we're all on the spectrum, no, if you're having a day where you're choosing to be antisocial, that's a choice. Autism is a core deficit that these people genuinely struggle with. Yeah.
Sorry, if you go back to the true or false, sorry. It said that autism is caused by bad parenting or emotional trauma. But at the beginning you said that trauma can also cause, like, especially if you see it in adulthood. So there's a conflict.
Oh, I didn't say, no, those are two different things.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, sorry if I did it wrong. Trauma is separate from autism. So what we tend to see children who have experienced trauma is what we call attachment disorders. So, for example, if they've experienced abuse from like a mother or a father, the way that they interact and communicate with people is going to be affected, and it can look like autism because of ultimately the model of like love and care they've received from caregiver, which is where we all learn how to love and interact and communicate. We work with children who have been through trauma, and neglect. Job is to distinguish whether it's autism or it's something more attack related. But yeah, they're two different things. But they can go together. So a lot of children who have experienced emotional trauma can also be autistic. So yeah, it's like the intellectual thing. They're different and also co-occur.
Thank you.
It's okay. Okay, consideration at church. This is the last bit now. Number one is do not judge. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know what condition, what someone's diagnosed with. You just don't know. Ultimately, nothing I've said in the other slides really matters. Like, you don't need to know diagnostic criteria. You don't need to know statistics and facts. Just don't judge people. Treat people with grace. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Even if you feel like someone's been rude to you or has misunderstood or not picked up that you were angry or upset, just don't judge them. Mark, can you read the verse? Where's the microphone? Can someone read? Sorry, it's my small font.
Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any block or obstacle in the way of your brother or sister.
Yep. So do not judge. If there's just anything you take from today, it's that. Minnie, yes?
Just for the second part of the verse, do not put any stumbling block or obstacle. Is there any piece of advice that you would offer for someone who perhaps knows autistic or some learning difficulty that might make it a bit easier for us to make it for them, as opposed to us being the block or us being something for them to decode? How can we be a bit easier for them to approach and feel comfortable?
There's a lot there. So you know that it's hard because everyone's unique, obviously, and what they struggle with might not be what everyone struggles with. Inclusion is really important, especially if by nature they struggle kind of socially to initiate those interactions or sustain those conversations. Just making sure that they're included, they're invited to things. If you're going to grab coffee or something, or you're all gathering at a spot afterwards, just giving them an invite, offering a lift, to make sure that they feel involved. Yeah. There was something else. I think we might get onto it actually towards the end. Yeah, it's one of my last points. Patience. Can someone read the Bible verse?
Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love.
So there might be people that you get easily frustrated. They might want to come and share with you all their knowledge about the topic they're obsessed with, whether it's cars or whatever. It's really easy to get irritated sometimes. Be patient. Yes.
If you're trying to be patient, because obviously that's the first thing that you try to do, there's only so much patience that certain people can have. So what can you suggest for people to be more patient in these situations?
So I think
without getting angry.
Accepting and understanding that person is wired differently. Also accepting your own limits as well. If you know that you're reaching the end like your patience, maybe calling on someone else who can come and take over interaction, or go for that person, offer them the lift, or knowing your own limitations as well, I think is fine. But yeah, understanding and just accepting that they are different as a first point of call. Does anyone else have any practical advice about that? About patience? Yes.
position, how do you want to be treated? And do what Jesus would do.
Nice, thank you, Patrick. Okay, these are things that just help autistic people in general, and you can think about in a church environment how this could be practical. But creating predictable and structured environments, like I said to you, autistic people are constantly trying to make sense of this social that they live in, and predictability just helps them anticipate what's going to happen. Often things use in practice, things like visual schedules or outlining routines. So you know those lovely like about on Easter, the timetables, things like that. It helps all of us, but autistic people especially, or people with any kind of like learning difficulty or anything like that, will find this helpful. In the service, consistency helps, keeping routines, locations, leaders stable where possible, or informing people when things like leader changes. Let people know who a point of contact is. And these are all things that help everyone. Sensory differences, I think, is something that shows up often, especially in children. Give breaks without judgment. If they know that they're going to struggle engaging, let them be near the back, let them have breaks. Some people wear ear defenders to help them cope with noise. Some people wear sunglasses indoors to help them with the lights. Again, this is really all about providing a judgment-free zone where people feel like that they can do this and not be judged. They know that they'll stand out if they may or may not. We know they'll stand out if they do things. So just about not judging them for it. Involve them, value their contributions. Can someone read the Bible verse?
Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms.
Well done, thank you. So, like I said, and I want to mention this as well, about how they'll have their own unique strengths, their own topic interest or areas of interest, in things like IT, they may be like really clever in certain areas that could actually benefit service. So them value their contributions. Lastly, don't be afraid to what they need. There's so much guessing we feel like we need to have, or guesses we need when it comes to what we think they need. Just be open with them. They'll appreciate that more than you try to make them feel seen, understood. Just ask. Lastly, show love. Someone read the Bible verse for the last time.
A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another.
Thank you, Monica. Any questions? Or thoughts, comments?
I don't know how to word this properly, but in terms of how, they said that they can feel, like they feel empathy just the same as everyone else. And empathy is trying, understanding that of somebody else's emotion. Mm. So are you saying that their emotions are on the same full scale as somebody without autism? Their emotions fall off the scale? Like, are they, maybe they get less angry, they get more happy or something like that?
So are you asking in terms of how they process emotions?
Yeah,
or
how they, like their emotions. To say, how can somebody be empathetic if they don't have the same full scale of emotions as somebody else?
How can someone be empathetic if they don't have the full scale? So they will experience the full scale of emotions. They may struggle with emotional regulation, so how they regulate those emotions.
So they do have full scale of emotions?
Yeah, just like we do. What they might struggle with is verbalizing it, so like putting it into language how they actually feel. They may struggle making sense of it themselves, but say that there's emotions that they don't internally feel, but it may be just the making meaning of the emotions or understanding their emotions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Please correct me at any point. Any question, other comment, or anything? Okay. Okay, ADHD is for another week. It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's also a neurodevelopmental condition. So part of the, I don't want to say part of the autism family because they're different, but ultimately affects attention and hyperactivity. What else do you want to know? We'll do another week. Okay. Well, you can ask if you...
My guys, where's Mike?
Thank you. I know that you have to have like a certain amount of things to be diagnosed as having ADHD. How many of those things?
So, it's a bit technical. There's uses of ADHD, there's inattention hyperactivity. There's 9 criteria each. You can have both. You can have a combined type, which is inattentive and hyperactive, or you could just have one. But each one has a set of 9 different criteria, which we can talk about. Anything else?
And important to see the potential of people rather than the problem that people have. And it's also important to accept people as they are, and we'll never be able to change anything. So these 3 things are very important, to see them as God's image is imprinted in them, as well as in me. And them to God is equally, if not more, as like me to God. So God looks at them with the same eye of love and compassion and grace and patience, the same way He looks at me. The same opportunity I have, we have to. So it's important to have this in mind.
That's a really nice way to end it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shukran.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you.
By the way, guys, you don't have to be all of a sudden like psychologists or psychiatrists in order to identify someone with